Hello, and thank you so much for joining us again for this week's episode of Midlife Real Life, our online chat show. And I'm joined today by our regular panellist, stylist and brand consultant, Maggie McMillan. Hi, Maggie.
Hey, everybody.
And also makeup artist, Jo Jewett. Hi, Jo.
Hello, how are you?
And we're thrilled to have join us today, GP and author of the Fast 800 recipe books, Dr. Clare Bailey. So Clare, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And it's slightly, I know perhaps in the last couple of episodes, we focused quite a lot on how we look, but obviously Midlife Real Life covers all aspects. And so today we thought it would be good to sort of talk about how we keep ourselves healthy at this time of our lives, especially in the context of the coronavirus and all that entails. So we're so pleased that Clare's with us to perhaps sort of clarify some aspects of that. So Clare, are there things that we should be doing nutrition-wise, or can nutrition actually help to support us through this particular period?
Absolutely. And that really is a fundamental question, because we know that in terms of supporting us through coronavirus, we know that it's a big assault on your immunity, on your immune system, and you need to have your immune system in the best state you can. And we know there are things that we can do that help your immune system and things that we do that really trash it. So it's a bit like an army, and you want it fighting fit and, you know, ready to go into action. So, you know, the big thing I would say in terms of lifestyle is to look at your diet. What we want is, you know, ideally the best diet that you can eat generally is the Mediterranean style diet, and that's been chosen, and that's been found to be the best, most healthy diet in the planet, and good for managing your weight. And so weight comes into it significantly. So just, you know, in terms of the Mediterranean style diet, it's not the one with the pizza, the pasta, and sadly the chips. But it's all the healthy food that you eat within that, with lots of oily fish, lots of vegetables, some fruit, pulses, beans, nut seeds, that sort of food, with a little bit of meat. And it's a healthy, and there are different styles of Mediterranean food that you can have. The Swedes are probably closest to eating the Mediterranean diet. So that's one element. And the other thing is variety, maintaining a good variety, not eating the kind of same food pretty much day in, day out, because you're probably likely to be missing out on minerals and nutrients that are vital, again, to help maintain and support your immunity. Other aspects of it is including intermittent fasting. And I don't know if most people have come across intermittent fasting in terms of the 5-2, where you cut your calories down 2 days a week and eat normally and sort of sensibly the rest of the week. And what that does, and part of it in the Fast 800 recipe book, are lots of recipes that give you examples of how to eat within roughly 800 calories during fast day. And what that does is it resets your metabolism and fine-tune, and part of doing that, it's good for your gut, it's good for your microbiome, and really the place where it's all happening is in your microbiome, those trillions of bugs that live down there in your gut, in the dark. So that we've only discovered in the last sort of 10 years what they do, and what an incredible job they do in terms of keeping us healthy. And so the Mediterranean style diet, particularly with the high fiber that it contains, feeds these good bugs, and you need them to produce things called I think substances that help boost your immunity. They help boost mood, and they help boost your health as well, but they're absolutely key to producing those substances, and that's why getting your diet right is absolutely vital. And one of the things is, the other thing is things not to do, because they then will crash your microbiome, and that's going out and eating lots of processed food and sweet and sugary stuff, because that kills off the good bugs.
Yeah. So I think, Maggie, you wanted to ask some questions about how this impacts us as we age as well, didn't you?
Yeah, well, yeah, as the oldest member of this team. No, I'm really interested in what we should be eating as we get older. I mean, I'm 68 on Sunday. What should we be eating as we get older to not just to boost our immune system, but actually, you know, to look after our hair, to look after our skin, you know, to give us energy. In addition to what, obviously, the diet that you've just spoken about, all those Mediterranean foods, is there anything, if I said to you, you know, what would be your 3 top items for me to have in my diet or in my cupboard, what would that be?
It's a really interesting question. Probably, I mean, I think you couldn't mention one item. I think one of the things that we are really bad at is bringing in healthy fibre, and that's the beans and pulses and whole grains, because they do make a disproportionate, and that's what your gut bacteria feed on. So we talk about the low carb diet, and actually we're talking about a moderately low carb diet, because that sort of fibre is also carbohydrates. So it's a much more nuanced than just all carbs are bad, because you need those, and you need those to support your microbiome. And that's where it's all happening. So if you can fill your cupboards with beans and whole grain rice, lentils of all sorts, you're doing yourself a great favour. I think the other thing would be olive oil. Lots of lovely luxurious olive oil. It's anti-inflammatory. It keeps you full. You know, if you think about things like a ratatouille, you hardly ever see them anymore because they've all gone low fat. And a ratatouille, which is low fat, is just watery and inedible. When it's covered with lots of luscious olive oil, it's absolutely glorious, and it's super healthy and keeps you full for longer.
That's really interesting.
Olive oil has an anti-inflammatory impact.
And when you say olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, is it how careful do we need to be where that olive oil has come from?
I think you just need to buy the best olive oil you can afford. I mean, I don't mean you need to go to sort of silly, you know, own brand, good quality. It's the extra virgin element of it that's most healthy. But I mean, whatever olive oil you can, you know, you can manage.
Yeah. Okay, that's all. Thank you so much.
And would you suggest the probiotics? You know, the liquid things and the tablets and supplements and things like that. Are they worthwhile, or would you say that you don't need them if you've got a sensible diet? Is it, you know?
I think you probably need both. You need the prebiotics and the probiotics, because you need to support the good bugs, and our diet, Western diet, is very depleted in a variety of good bugs. So if you eat some, and my big thing, and I've actually brought it in here if you want to see it, is this stuff. I don't know if you can see it, fermented foods.
Oh my gosh.
And you need
foods.
But you need to be feeding it with, and so more fermented foods. So you need to be feeding your microbiome with all the right fibre, all the right substances, as well as and boosting and getting those good bugs in there, which are not broken down by the acid in. We used to think that they're all nuked by the acid in the stomach, but now we know that quite a lot of it gets down there. So it's a sort of symbiotic process. They, you know, if it's like, you know, your lawn, you put the seeds down, but then you also fertilize it.
Claire, just for those people watching, could you maybe just explain in layman's terms the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic?
You know, I have, it's almost like dyslexia on prebiotics and probiotics. I always get the name of each of them back to front. So I'm not going to pretend that I get you, and I've written it and I've spoken it so many times. But basically, what you need, you need the good bugs, and you need to feed the good bugs.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying you sort of ideally need both. And yes, if you want to get good quality capsules from the chemist, you want.
And which is which? Which feeds the good bugs? The prebiotic.
Well, the fibre and what makes it down to your microbiome is what's feeding the good bugs.
And is that a prebiotic or a probiotic?
Well, that's what I was saying. I have like dyslexia with those two words, and I should practice it before I do any interview. But they basically work. They work together. And if you're using,
do they? Okay.
So if you're using the capsules, then you need to use one with a high quantity of bugs, of bacteria in it. But you also need to have a variety. But if you just take the capsules and you have a crap diet, it's not going to do anything. So you have to have the diet that is going to feed them and help them thrive. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So really, that's where bringing back in the best fibre you can get is beans pulses, and then there's soluble fibre with things like Jerusalem artichokes and pak choi. So I try and include these things in the recipes, just to boost the microbiome.
Gosh, that's interesting, because Jerusalem artichokes, I think if you did a sort of survey of 100 shopping baskets, I think it'd be quite interesting how few of them would probably have Jerusalem artichokes in them.
Very, very few, and it's partly a seasonal thing. They're also known as fartichokes because if you're not used to it, you do create a lot of wind. And also, I think people think, I'm meant to be peeling them, and I wouldn't peel them. They're knobbly, they're awkward looking, they're quite ugly looking vegetable food. Don't bother peeling them. Clean off any really knobbly bits. With fruit and vegetables, most of the benefit is actually within the skin. So what you're doing is losing all those extra nutrients. So don't peel your apples, don't peel your potatoes. We never peel potatoes.
Well, so presumably you wouldn't peel a sweet potato?
No.
I love the sweet potato skin. I love it. It's my favourite bit. Yeah.
And it's the bit to eat. If you're going to eat any bit, eat the skin.
How extraordinary. Well, that's fantastic.
So you come in with things like Jerusalem artichokes, which are they're not widely used. They taste fantastic. They have a particular taste, but chuck them in the oven and roast them. Put them in a soup. They're easy to use.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I feel better now. I hate peeling those kind of things.
If you buy them in, already prepared, because I do love artichokes, but I get them and they're already in olive oil and already prepared from Marks and Spencer, actually, and just as a kind of picky. Have they lost the strength of what you're suggesting there, or are they good to eat as well?
I think that might be globe artichokes, which are the slightly leafy ones, which are also fantastic. There's loads of fibre in those, and enjoy them.
So I shall continue to buy them.
And we mentioned earlier about how we perhaps are lacking a lot of minerals and things that we need at the moment in our modern diet. But I mean, if you go back to the COVID situation, there's a lot of press coverage that says vitamin D is beneficial. So apart from sort of going out and sitting in the sun, how do we get, is that true? And secondly, if it is, how do we get more vitamin D into our diet?
Okay, good question. But without doubt, the best way to getting vitamin D is through the sun. Without getting, you expose yourself without burning. And one of the problems is that over the winter, pretty much half of us become vitamin D depleted.
Right.
And that's been made worse by the fact that we've been stuck indoors for the last 3 months. Which is not ideal, but you can get it from food. And it's in terms of food, it's oily fish, eggs, mushrooms. Actually, I did a post on Instagram recently, and putting your mushrooms on the windowsill, you get, and line them up on the windowsill in the sun, and you get 100 times more vitamin D in them. Mushrooms are a good source.
Oh,
Amazing.
Lots of vitamin D, aren't they, mushrooms? Yeah.
So, you know, you can get it through food, and the other thing is through supplements. Now, there's been lots of debate, and you know, in terms of whether taking vitamin D will protect you, because whether the vitamin D tablets or it's something else associated with vitamin D that makes the difference. So it's not. It looks on the face of it as if we know vitamin D is vital for your immunity. And if you're low in vitamin D, you should certainly be supplementing. And a lot of people, you know, people are advised to supplement over the winter for that reason. But actually going to high quantities of vitamin D and what you would say boosting beyond a normal level, there really isn't evidence, and it can be damaging. So recently people have been taking extra high quantities of vitamin D, and that can be damaging. So it's finding somewhere in the middle.
And if you take vitamin D, is it one of those things that stays in your system for a long time, or is it something like, no, certain vitamins you only really last a day or so? It's one of those ones
yeah, it does stay in your system. I don't know how long for, and that's probably quite an individual thing. But if you are low in vitamin D, you do have to have a sort of booster dose to top you up to get your levels back to normal.
And also, I thought I read somewhere that you needed to take, for vitamin D to activate, you needed to take it with food. Is that true, do you think? Is that, in your experience, would you suggest we should take it with food?
I'm not sure about vitamin D. I know things like iron you have to take not with food, and at certain, you take it with citrus fruits, the acidics.
Interesting.
With vitamin D, I'm not aware, but the evidence in terms of using vitamin D, there are some that show that it can reduce respiratory symptoms, but this is not specifically in COVID. And I don't think there's big trials have been done, and really remarkably little in terms of saying you must, you know, we know that this is effective with supplementation.
Can I ask you something? When I had, hundreds of years ago, had the joy of doing Barbara Streisand's makeup and going through a makeup session with her, and she told me about all the joys of lemons, and one of the things was rubbing them on your elbows, your knees. I shared that with the girls the other day. But she also told me to do lemon and ginger and honey in a hot drink, and that actually helps your skin and your gut. You've got lovely skin, Claire. So what would you say that helps?
I'm not sure. I think Zoom is very forgiving on skin front. I've
lovely skin. Really?
I've nuked my face with years of not using proper sun cream. But so it is that balance. In terms of lemon and ginger, they both could have anti-inflammatory properties. And it's, ginger, we know, has some anti-inflammatory properties. And so who knows? Not so sure about.
She looks good on it, so I'll keep drinking it.
Thank you for the compliment, me.
And then also, maybe look at some of the other, I guess, high risk factors anyway. I mean, they're saying you're more perhaps at high risk with COVID if you're diabetic. I mean, why is that? And I certainly know from, I think, coming to the Fast 800 seminar a while ago, that it seems that you can actually reverse that with diet. Is that something we should be looking at as well?
Absolutely. I mean, it's actually really, sad. The whole one of the inadvertent consequences of lockdown is quite a lot of people will be putting on weight because of the restrictions, inactivity, restrictions in the food that they're able to get, and it is without doubt a significant risk factor. We know that that people with type 2 diabetes and with diabetes have a double the risk of dying from COVID, and a quarter of those in ITU, I believe, are type 2 diabetics.
Yeah.
So it really does have an impact. Now, it's more about your, it's linked with obesity, but obesity in itself is not automatically a risk factor. It depends where you store your fat.
Right.
It seems to be much more linked to what we call the metabolic syndrome. It's a kind of group of factors that we know increase risk of all sorts of other conditions, and they are very much related to your diet and your lifestyle. So that is particularly things like storing weight around the middle. You can even be a normal weight, but if you store your weight around the middle in the abdomen as tummy fat or around the neck, you are more at risk. Associated with metabolic syndrome, associated with raised blood pressure, with abnormal lipid fat cholesterol levels, and it's also associated with raised sugars, which can be pre-diabetic or in the diabetic range. Now, all those together conspire to make to increase risks.
Right.
And it seems that the virus thrives on sugar.
Right.
So if your sugar is up, your ability to fight infection is down. And the other element about being very overweight is it has a sort of it restricts breathing in its own. It restricts the physical ability to shift the oxygen. So diet is hugely important in terms of and getting weight down to a sort of reasonable level. And this isn't about how you're looking, it's about being metabolically fit.
Absolutely. And so exercise is a big issue, and is a big part of a healthy living, would you say?
Exercise.
Yeah.
Exercise is a very big part of being fit and cardiovascular fit. It has all sorts of benefits on memory, lots of health benefits, feel good, mood. It's not a great way of losing weight.
Okay.
You have to run an awful, I forget the statistics for it, but you have to run an awful long way to, run off the Mars bar. And, people who do exercise quite often do what they say is compensatory relaxation afterwards. And so, treat themselves to that muffin because they've done all that exercise. It's a great thing to be doing. But what we tend to say is about 80% is about diet.
Claire,
and that's where you will get the quickest impact. And then you can start exercising because you feel better, you're not so heavy, and you get into a positive cycle.
Claire, before we came on air, we were talking briefly about the idea of losing weight slowly, which we have all had pumped into our brains for so many years about, losing weight slowly, that way you'll keep it off. And we were discussing that actually maybe that is not always the answer, and that the better way to lose weight is quickly, not just from a psychological point of view, but presumably from a physical point of view. So perhaps would you be able to explain that, because I think that's fascinating.
Yes, as you say, we've traditionally been told to eat 3 meals a day, never skip breakfast, and then to have little snacks in between. So that means you're eating 6 meals of some form a day. So that impact of that is you've always got glucose circulating in your blood, and your body is constantly trying to process, because high levels of glucose in your blood is damaging to the cells. So your body has to kind of go red alert, get your insulin in to take the sugar out of the blood and to store it as fat, because insulin's job is fat storage. And so what happens is your insulin level is creeping up over time, So it does put you more risk of getting diabetes, because eventually your insulin is not, you're not able to keep up with it, and the sugars start to rise. So that's been the sort of traditional thing, and it is still commonly standard advice. You know, I've seen that recently in NHS weight loss programs, and it's just tragic. And they're programs that are the precede the next stage, which is bariatric surgery. And you think it's just, you know, if the evidence is so clear that rapid weight loss gets people to where they want to be quicker, and they're more likely to get there. Motivation is better, they feel better quickly, and they're more likely to stick to it.
Well, as a person who's been permanently on a diet since I was 16, I think I kind of gave up at about 45 and just let it all. But I think with my family, I've got 2 brothers and a sister, and my father was big, but my mother was like 5 foot nothing, and that was it. Well, she's still here, thank God. But I think in families, yet my husband, who has got type 2 diabetes, which is why I'm kind of listening with intent every word you're saying, he comes from a very thin family. He's always been quite thin, and he's got this diabetes, but all of us are kind of clear because we've all been tested. So is it absolutely weight-related diabetes, or is it something?
No, about a third of it's more what you're eating. So it's a third of people are normal. So my husband Michael was diagnosed as type 2. What kicked it all off was when he was diagnosed with having type 2 diabetes, and then he said, I don't want to go straight on medication, because all the medication, it does bring it down, but the long-term benefit is not proven in terms of future, or
I've heard that, yeah.
It's, you know, there is still a slow, if people don't change their diets, there's a slow progression to so anyway, so moving away from that, he then said, I don't want to do it with medication, so he did it through intermittent fasting. But his weight was just on the borderline of, it was, I think his BMI was something like 26 or 27, and you wouldn't have particularly noticed, except that he's kept it around his waist. One of the problems with people who are constantly hungry is because when your sugars are constantly up, and Michael always describes it, it's like shouting at the kids. You go on shouting and eventually they start ignoring you, and that's what kind of happens with the hormones that tell you that you're full, that you're satiated, and they stop working as your sugars go up, creep up. So very often people are left constantly craving and constantly hungry, and that may be partly the microbiome, because your microbiome, if you're eating a lot of starch and sugar, it is more likely to leave you sort of craving those sorts of foods. Whereas the thing with changing your metabolism, doing intermittent fasting, helps reset your metabolism, so that when you finish the meal, you're actually full and you feel full, and you're not craving food. So it's not being greedy at all. It is your metabolism is telling you to eat.
Oh, yeah.
And there's another way. One of the things I didn't say about intermittent fasting, there's also a fantastic way to add to it, and that's versions of what's called 16-8. But 16-8 is quite hardcore. It's basically when you start breakfast slightly later in the morning and eat your supper a bit earlier. You know, start with doing a 12-hour window, and that gives you an overnight fast of 12 hours. And that improves it. That helps. I mean, I don't mean boost your metabolism, but it helps get your sugars back to normal and helps improve things. And if you can then move to do a 14-10, where you were eating within a 10-hour window, that's a form of intermittent fasting. And a lot of people do that. It's very popular and it's very effective. And you can do it alongside the fast 800, doing 800 calories. Mm-hmm. They work well together.
And if somebody was to start to make those changes, how long would they see an improvement in their insulin levels?
Oh, very quickly. I mean, I worked with a lot of, if you're on diabetic medication, you do need to check with your doctor, and if you're on blood pressure or other relevant medication, because it will bring sugars down quite quickly. Right. So, you know, we see changes within a week or 2 weeks, sugars significantly come down and weight goes down. So it's very rewarding.
Mm-hmm. And so presumably this would be great for someone who is not necessarily pre-diabetic, but who is very aware that they would like to lose weight and they have huge sugar cravings. They could go on this 800 calorie day diet, and that would help them. That would sort of level out their sugar cravings.
You know, I'm not quite sure we can make a promise as kind of, you know, clear cut as that.
Yes.
But what we do find is that people come back after a couple of weeks, particularly people who have got some weight to lose and whose sugar is beginning to creep up, and they have been hungry a lot of the time, and they come back in and they say, look, this is the first diet that I've been on, I just haven't been hungry all the time. You know, I can do it. And you know, who would have guessed that I could do 800 calories? And it's because of that combination of Mediterranean style diet, keeps you full, and the fasting element. It's you know, 800 calorie fasting.
And when you say 800 calorie fasting, and in your window of eating, would that be 3 meals within that window of eating, or would you say 2 meals? Does that just depend on how hungry you are?
Totally depends on you. Some people, you know, can't get out of the house without breakfast and they're feeling feeble. Some people are not bothered by breakfast and don't want to have, you know, want to eat later. The main thing, if you're not having breakfast, is to have a good glass of water or something, just to keep your fluids, because that's what leaves people feeling. One of the things on 800 calories days, people sometimes say, oh, I feel so tired, and I sometimes get a headache, and that's usually dehydration rather than not having the calories on board, because your body's very clever at clocking into burning fat. And so we wouldn't have gotten, you know, we wouldn't have got out of Africa, so to speak, walked across deserts if we'd had to, you know, snack all the time and eat continually. But we can burn our reserves. It's like the sort of, you know, money in the bank. You've got your cash in your pocket, which you burn quickly, and you've got the stuff in the deposit that takes a bit longer to start producing the energy. But once your body's used to it, people find it's fairly easy to do.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to buy your book.
And the rest, and also, Jo, there's an online program as well, isn't there, Claire?
There
you
is.
Can subscribe to. Yeah.
There's a fantastic online program, thefast800.com, and it's brilliant, because what it does is it takes you through all aspects of it, because there's not just one thing. You know, you get, and what they give you is all the recipes. You can choose what type of recipe you want. You can choose whether you do eat twice a day, you know, have a big lunch and a small supper, or how you want to plan, and then they give you recipe lists and shopping lists and things, and support from the forum. But having exercise alongside really helps. And then the kind of support in terms of, we know that stress and poor sleep has a massive impact, not only on your weight, but also on your health and your immune system. You know, there's clear evidence of that. So again, you know, mindfulness, whatever ways of helping manage stress is really key.
And I have actually, last year when it first launched, I did actually take a look at it. Not that I actually needed to lose weight, and funnily enough, I naturally kind of do intermittent fasting. I never have breakfast, and I pretty well followed a Mediterranean diet for nearly 30 years. I had a medical condition which I decided I didn't want. I weaned myself off all the drugs basically, and manage it pretty well 100% the diet, and it was all anti-inflammatory foods, so all the things that we're not we're talking about now, but that's what worked for me.
Well, that is in a way what we're talking about, because this absolutely is anti-inflammatory food.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is becoming increasingly clear across, the width of the breadth of benefit and impact of having anti-inflammatory food, because the Western diet and lifestyle is very pro-inflammatory. Yeah. And so by changing to a healthy Mediterranean style diet, you're protecting yourself. If you then go off and kind of, eat loads of processed, sugary, sweet stuff, you kind of undo the benefit, because again, it goes back to microbiome. And if you're kind of knocking off all those good bugs that you're nurturing, your lovely Mediterranean diet and your fermented foods, you're undoing that good work. But you're absolutely right. Even in patients, seeing people with inflammatory arthritis, all sorts of asthma is an it's general body inflammation if you're significantly overweight and eating the wrong food. And that puts, other conditions there. People find that, with psoriasis, with all sorts of conditions, when you reduce weight and change your diet, people and gut problems, gut inflammation can have a really impressive impact.
And in fact, that even if you don't need to lose weight, if you're not diabetic, some really interesting recipes there anyway. Because I really like, there was one where you might have had a slice of toast. There are versions on a big mushroom.
Yes.
So I think it's mushroom and smoked salmon and poached egg. It's delicious to have that for lunch.
Wonderful.
Nice.
Yeah. So interesting outside of the weight loss scenario.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm rather more like you, where I don't particularly put on weight, but I've always eaten this way, and so the recipes are very much the sort of food I would like. I like eating. I'm very lucky. I don't have a sweet tooth, so I'm not really bothered. So Mike can leave as much chocolate next to me, and I might nibble at a corner, kind of thing. Whereas I like savoury food.
No, I'd have the whole bar.
But I do think it's interesting how you can sort of retrain your palate a bit, because as I say, I really am a chocoholic, and I have a very, very, very sweet tooth. But I really have managed to, I did have COVID, and I then lost my sense of taste and smell, and I became obsessed by apples. I've never eaten apples in my life. When I couldn't taste or smell, I yearned for apples, and I bought them, and now I eat 2 apples a day. I just dream of apples. I love apples.
Keep
bizarre. But all the years, when I wasn't interested in apples, but I think on my palate coming out of this is very different 3 months on.
Has it recovered? Has it come?
Not totally.
No.
I mean, if I was having a curry, I would know it was a curry, but I wouldn't have the subtlety of flavours at all. It's not completely back at all. And I had it on the 12th of March, so a long time ago.
You had it, Maggie. Crikey.
Yeah. Yes, and I had an antibody test this week, so I just found out that I have antibodies, which is great, temporarily, we can't be too careful.
I mean, I'm not, people keep saying, we don't think the antibodies will last. It's a very stable virus, and I would be very surprised if they don't last at least, a year to get a top up as a minimum. But I don't know why going around that they tell people that the antibodies are not going to, it needs to be a respectable, reliable test.
It's so interesting, isn't it, about the taste and smell, because I got it very early on, obviously, and at that point there was nothing written about the taste and smell, and I thought I had the flu. I didn't even think that I had COVID. I thought I had the flu, and I was really unwell, and I then phoned my really dear friend who's a GP, and I said, oh my God, on top of the flu, now I've got a brain tumour. I can't taste and I can't smell. What am I going to do? And then when we started looking, people had started reporting it, but my smell is now, I would say, 95% back, but my taste isn't. my taste is about 80% back. It's the subtleties of flavour that I don't have, interestingly. But now it's become one of the big three, really, hasn't it? Taste and smell. In terms of
my sons had it, and they both completely lost their sense of smell. And you know, I could have fed them cardboard; they wouldn't have noticed.
No, it is quite interesting, and it reminds you how much you rely on taste and smell when you're eating, how important it is, because I just wasn't interested in anything except this longing for apples, and even when I couldn't taste them, I just enjoyed eating them. And now, as I say, if I don't have 2 apples a day, they're my go-to. It's quite extraordinary. Isn't it strange?
Well, they say an apple a day.
Yeah,
absolutely.
How are your sons, Claire? Are they all right?
They were fine. One of them had just come back from Australia and been living with, it was back in March, very early on, literally just before the lockdown, and he was living with some doctors in Australia. And a few days after he got back, or some days after they said, oh, by the way, we've all got it. And he was unwell with a fever and really bad muscle aches for a few days. And our other son, who's actually now working, he's a junior doctor working in intensive care, he got it as well. And, you know, but he was fine. I mean, in their age group, without significant, you know, other chronic
factors,
other complications, they really, you know, would be expected to come through without.
Interestingly, Claire, given that I guess there will be a number of people who actually have had it, or think they've had it, or maybe don't even know they've had it. Is there anything, and this is wearing your GP hat, you know, GP stroke nutritionist hat, are there any people who have had it and have recovered from it? Let's say there's people who know they've had it because the symptoms were so obvious and have recovered from it. Is there anything that they should look out for going forward in terms of their general health? And also, is there anything extra they can take afterwards to boost their wellness, in inverted commas?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think if people have been very ill and intensive care, and you know, there are huge complications.
Of course,
of people coming out that, you know, and I wouldn't go down that way because complications are so people get so the thing about boosting immunity, and actually it's not, Michael is not, and I'm not using the words quite so much because it's quite what happens later in the disease when they get an overactive immune system and then start damaging their own tissues. So you go from slow.
And these are people who've had it very seriously.
Yes, and then they get excessive immune response.
Okay.
So it goes from one extreme to the other. So it's not a well-coordinated immune response.
But what about people who sort of, you know, have had it as we would like the flu? You know, I've had it, we've had those symptoms, been like the flu. Presumably,
I think it's the same. You know,
it's
I think
the same
it's
as
just
the flu.
the same.
That's the same as any flu.
Yeah.
You
You
know,
know,
if you carried on being breathless, or you found yourself breathless going forward, you would maybe take a look at that, and you would just make sure that you have this wonderful Mediterranean diet, eat lots of good things.
Absolutely, and just gradually getting back to, you know, after any significant viral infection or illness, it takes time and depends how badly you've had it. But it will take time for you know, for breathlessness to settle. And I do think the more, you know, it's not pushing it too hard, and it's the kind of those sort of common sense things, getting out you can, getting in the sun if you can, just, you know, gradually rebuilding your health and fitness.
So I guess another general question then would be, like, because obviously all the emphasis and all the daily updates we have are about the number of, you know, COVID infections and the death, was obviously very upsetting and sad for people. But what about the people perhaps who have other symptoms, who are sitting at home thinking, well, they don't want to go to the doctor, they don't want to go to A&E because they'd be afraid of actually getting it if they walk into a hospital, for instance. I mean, as a GP, what are you finding?
I think the messaging has created a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And there is no doubt that, particularly at the sort of emergency end, that people have, in many cases, I think by half, reduced admissions for things like chest pain, for possible strokes, and acute abdominal presentations like appendicitis have been reduced, and that has had unintended but damaging consequences. There will be people, if the numbers are down that much, who may have ended up with some damage that could have been sorted. And the message is, if you are worried about such symptoms, get in touch with the emergency services and follow it up. They have proper systems to make sure that COVID is kept. People with COVID are in a day, so it is very well managed. And the message is, don't avoid going in for important things. They are expecting, they're wanting you to go in, and
they are wanting you, aren't they now? I mean,
so there was a time when we were sort of being told don't go in any circumstances, but the NHS hasn't in that sense been overwhelmed, and they are still there and they're expecting people to come in. You should go in.
Reassuringly, a friend of mine's son-in-law fell off a ladder recently and was taken to A&E. And they said it was just quite incredible. He'd fallen off something else or done something sport-wise a while back, and it'd all been a bit of a nightmare. But they said now, since COVID, they said it was absolutely amazing. He was in a separate entrance. He was tested for COVID, reaching the second he got there. It was all very calm. He was given a room, and was the most extraordinary experience.
So that's very reassuring.
I think we have to tell people that, don't we?
Yeah.
We have to tell people that, and say, don't be scared of going. Because the next thing that we don't want to happen is that doctors in these particular areas of expertise are overwhelmed by the backlog of people.
And sadly, there is going to be a huge backlog. Once services start opening and working out how to manage with the current constraints, there will be a backlog.
But, I think we've really got to be a little bit more positive about this and start sending some positive messages out there.
Yes.
Because, you've just 3 stories there where absolutely everything's fine. And the terrible thing is 80% of taste. And Maggie's got this absolutely urge to eat apples, which happy days.
Is it?
Happy days.
They just tell you though, you say, we're all, most of us are sensible people. There are a lot of people around who are not being sensible. And do you know what's worrying me more than anything else? When I see all those people at that beach, you know what I keep thinking? Where on earth are they going to the loo? Where are all those children going to the loo? And the next thing, we're going to have norovirus is going to be everywhere, because the loos are not open, and not everyone is being sensible. And I think that we have to, we have to, we're not out of the woods, are we? I think.
But, there are people stuck in flats that have never been out of the house for months. They're obviously going to think, well, by next week, all the kids are going to go back to school. So there is a moment where you just think, well, actually, we do have to get out there. You daren't put anything on social media because you get completely bombarded with, death threats if you suggest something like that. But, we have got to be sensible about this. And I do think most people are being sensible, to be honest. I'd like to just think that we all are just getting on with it. We're doing very well under the circumstances. On a positive note, let's be positive though.
So on a positive note then, should we just talk about our hero products? And I'm not sure if Maggie's brought 2 apples to show us for hers, but
Come on, Maggie, show us your apples.
I've got none left.
Show us your apples, Maggie. Get your apples. Get your apples out.
No, I don't have anything with me, but my hero products. The first one is the Archers is back.
Oh, hurrah. I'm a big fan.
Talk about, sleep aid. For as long as I can remember, my go-to sleep aid is I do live on my own, I hasten to add, is listening to that day's episode of The Archers. And for me, it was my sort of bedtime book, and I have missed it beyond. And they then started rerunning old episodes. I wasn't interested in that at all. But we're back in real time. They're all dealing with the pandemic, and so The Archers is back. And the second help you get to sleep, relax you before you go to bed is it's called What's on Stage at Home. And if you go on to What's on Stage at Home, all these wonderful musicals and plays that we can access online that we probably would never get around to going to see at the theatre because we couldn't afford it, or we didn't have the time, and we just never got round to it. And then, I saw Streetcar Named Desire last week, which was fantastic, with Gillian Anderson. And there are people who've got children. Hairspray, I think, is one of the ones this week. There have been amazing things. So that's my two. That should only have been one, but it's like 1.5. Hero is What's on Stage / Home. At home, actually.
At home. Me? Do you want me?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I was going to do kind of this Studio 10 highlighter, which I've just found that just highlight wrinkles. But when I heard about Claire coming on, I thought I'd better do something else.
Oh, mint. Are you enjoying it?
Mint tea. Mint tea. Mint with Barbara Streisand's lemon stuck in it.
Okay.
Yes, and honey, Claire. Are you impressed? Honey.
Very.
Jo, it's great in a mojito too.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. It's quite nice in gin. But I have got an abundance because foolishly I planted it, but I didn't plant it in a pot.
A contained
So
area.
I am now I've got mint going everywhere, including the lawn, which is it's constant. So if you ever want any mint or rhubarb, I'm your girl.
Oh, rhubarb, yes.
Loads of rhubarb. Rhubarb. Right, I'm done.
Right, Claire, what would you?
Well, do you know, actually, I sort of brought it earlier and waved it at you. Is this?
Yeah.
You can work out what it is. It's sauerkraut.
Right.
Oh.
Kimchi.
It's about, I do two, and there's a recipe, I think, on the fast800.com for it. And this is the other, what I was doing this morning was chopping cabbage, an onion, and some fennel, and then squishing it down just to, I don't know if you can see it here, so you squish it down with a couple of tablespoons of salt, mix it in, then all the fluid comes out, and then I'll put it in one of these jars and make half of it into kimchi, adding a bit of ginger, possibly some garlic, some chili, a bit of paprika.
I love kimchi.
And a bit of paprika and a little bit of fish sauce. And so I have two versions for those who are kind of hardcore, or we kind of big chili eaters in this house. And the kind of more standard plain sauerkraut, which is this one.
Oh, I love sauerkraut.
Just love it, and having it kind of with our omelets and with salads, and even the kids are now making it themselves. It's so now become
so good for you.
And have you got recipes for fermented foods in your books?
Yes.
Yeah.
I always kind of bring this as sort of, because a lot of the problem is a lot of fermented food that you get in supermarkets is actually not live, or is sterile in vinegar, and that's a kind of different thing. Whereas the stuff you make at home, it's very cheap, very easy, and tastes fantastic.
Excuse me, they've been making kimchi on the Archers in the dairy. Susan's been making kimchi. Yeah. And that was before all this.
Was that kefir?
Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't kimchi, was it? It was kefir.
It might have been kefir, yes, but that's another fermented thing.
Oh, it was. You're right.
Yeah. It's
right.
a kind of fermented yogurty.
Yes. No, kimchi. What about yours?
Well, mine is totally different. And don't might have seen me wear this. Mine's just a necklace. And the reason I've got a necklace is whereas for the last 25 years I've been working from home, people have been very, very happy to have phone calls. Now I get messages, can we do a Zoom call in 10 minutes? So I'm normally not looking very smart, especially, you know, shaggy hair day, all the rest of it. And at the moment I've got my office set up in the garden. I have to just put a plain top on. I've got this next to my laptop and I can look fairly presentable on Zoom calls, because they're absolutely, it's one thing if you've got something scheduled, but it's like people want Zoom calls for everything now.
Is that heavy? Is that heavy?
It is quite heavy, yeah.
Yeah, you see, you remember the other week.
It covers up a lot. It covers up a lot.
Yeah, I bought mine similar, but when I go to meetings, I put it on my car seat.
Yeah.
Because when I get there, because it's so heavy.
Yeah, it's not one I'd wear all day, but it's kind of, you know, it kind of, and I think also I tend to wear a lot of black, and so black can be quite draining when you're on camera. So if you put this, it catches the light.
Excellent. You look gorgeous.
And then, you know, it kind of detracts from the fact I'm probably a bit scruffy. So
I'm not glamorous.
So I'm not wearing it now. So I mean, because this was a plan call, I was able to put something a bit brighter on. But thank you. What I'd like to say is thank you so much, Claire, for joining us, because I think there is so much concern and confusion, isn't there, out there?
Yeah, it was really good, Claire. Thanks for that.
I've
taken a lot away.
Good. Well, it's a pleasure. If you have any queries, do get in touch. And and in fact, there's recipes on my Instagram, Dr. Clare Bailey, which is as in Dr. Clare Bailey. If you want to follow some of them.
And if people want to find you, how would they find you, Claire?
Probably via Instagram is easiest, or the fast800.com.
Okay, lovely.
How do we spell your Bailey?
Well, it's Dr. Clare, no I, Bailey, Bailey.
I'm on it now. Thank you so much.
You sharing anyway, Carrie.
It's been great fun to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. And for everybody else who's watching from home, we really hope you join us next week. And thank you for all your support so far. So for now, from Maggie, Jo, myself, and our guest Claire, it's goodbye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Stay safe.